If you've been diagnosed with PCOS, you might actually be treating the wrong type. Most people don't know that PCOS isn't just one condition. It's actually 4 distinct phenotypes, and each requires a different type of treatment. Hi, I'm Kara McIver, a registered dietitian, and I educate young and middle-aged adults on evidence-based, easy-to-accomplish nutrition, diet, and lifestyle changes to manage their chronic diseases. I mostly focus on conditions related to insulin resistance, and today we're going to talk about polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS. If you don't have the time or the money to see a registered dietitian, this is the YouTube channel for you. I want to be transparent here. I do not have PCOS, but insulin-related conditions are why I became a registered dietitian, and I did my master's thesis on another estrogen-related condition called lipedema. So I hope that you can trust me when I say I care about you, I know a little bit about what you're going through, and I do really want to help. So let's get into it. PCOS affects 10 to 15% of reproductive age females. Many of these folks go undiagnosed for a long time, maybe even most or all of their life, and PCOS is one of the leading causes of infertility. Patients with PCOS are more likely to develop hypertension, type 2 diabetes, hyperlipidemia, heart disease, endometrial cancer, and eating disorders, making early diagnosis and treatment really crucial for their long-term health. PCOS also increases the risk of miscarriage, preeclampsia, gestational hypertension, gestational diabetes, and cesarean deliveries. And because PCOS is a syndrome specifically, that means it is a condition characterized by a set of symptoms that may not always present exactly the same in all patients, and there is no unequivocal diagnostic criteria. Historically, the Rotterdam criteria has been used to diagnose patients with PCOS. The Rotterdam criteria has 3 key features that we tend to see in folks with PCOS. And to get a PCOS diagnosis, you have to be exhibiting at least 2 of the key features, if not all 3. Because patients can have only 2 of the 3 key features, we end up with different phenotypes, which is just our scientific word for flavors of PCOS. And what research is finding more and more is that treatment success really comes down to treating the right phenotype. Many patients receive a generic PCOS diagnosis without an associated phenotype. And many of these patients are prescribed clomiphene. And that is a prescription medication that blocks some of the estrogen receptors in the brain. So it kind of tricks our body into thinking we are not making any estrogen, which leads us to increase the amount of estrogen that we make, which can be effective if the problem that this patient is experiencing has to do with a lack of estrogen. But again, because there are those different phenotypes, it doesn't necessarily work for all of our PCOS patients. So understanding your phenotype can mean breakthroughs in your treatment plan. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into what the key features of the Rotterdam criteria are, what symptoms each phenotype tends to exhibit, and then I actually have a self-assessment tool that you can use to determine your own phenotype. And there is actually a link to the self-assessment guide in the description of this video. You can fill this out as we're walking through the video and actually take it with you to the doctor the next go. This might just be a handy worksheet for you to have some language to use with your doctor. The 3 key features of the Rotterdam criteria are: number 1, irregular or absent periods, and this is referred to as ovulatory dysfunction. The second key feature is high levels of androgens or hyperandrogenism, and this just means you are exhibiting higher levels of what we typically think of as male sex hormones as opposed to female sex hormones. The third criteria is a polycystic ovary or ovaries seen on ultrasound. And this is criteria that is widely but not always used by physicians to diagnose PCOS. A study released in 2022 recommended that physicians look at levels of anti-Muralian hormone or AMH And that is because AMH is only released from ovarian follicles. So that is a very useful biochemical metric of if a patient has higher than expected ovarian follicles. And AMH can be read just by doing a blood test, which tends to be less expensive, more accessible, and less invasive than having an ultrasound done of the ovary. So let's dig a little bit deeper into these three key features. Ovulatory dysfunction means irregular or absent ovulation. This could mean menstrual cycles that last longer than 35 days or fewer than 9 menstrual cycles in a year. It could mean missed periods, very light periods, or very heavy bleeding when you do have a period. Now, there are other things, including genetics, stress, change in environment, not eating enough calories to support your activity level, and even drugs that can change your menstrual cycle. So that alone is not enough to diagnose PCOS, which is why we have these other two potential criteria as well. And the next one is that hyperandrogenism. And doctors can observe hyperandrogenism either clinically, which means looking at the signs and symptoms, or biochemically, which again means taking your blood or taking a sample of another tissue and looking at the actual amount of those male hormones circulating in your body. And those signs and symptoms of these high androgens might be things like hair growing in places that it typically doesn't on females, or even male pattern baldness. And then again, that third criteria is those polycystic ovaries, which means 12 or more follicles or an ovarian volume of more than 10 mLs. Now, depending on which of these key features are presenting in your type of PCOS will determine your phenotype. Phenotype A, or classic PCOS, is when you are exhibiting all three features on the Rotterdam criteria. This tends to be the most severe form of PCOS. It has the highest rates of insulin resistance, the greatest metabolic disease risk, the highest cardiovascular disease risk, and it is the most resistant to that clomiphene treatment that we talked about earlier, and it often presents with obesity and lipid abnormalities. Phenotype B is non-PCO PCOS. This is if a patient is experiencing hyperandrogenism and ovulatory dysfunction, but they don't have those polycystic ovaries or that high AMH level. So there's a significant hormonal imbalance, but no ovarian cysts. Folks with phenotype B have more of an intermediate metabolic risk, so not nothing, but not as high as the folks who have phenotype A. They have stronger hyperandrogenic symptoms, which means they may be experiencing more of that excessive hair growth, or the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe even hair loss. Typically, ovulatory dysfunction is the primary concern for this group, and unfortunately, there is less research available compared to the other phenotype for phenotype B. Phenotype C is referred to as ovulatory PCOS. These folks have hyperandrogenism and polycystic ovaries, but they have normal ovulation. So these folks have regular menstrual cycles despite their PCOS diagnosis. They have lower insulin resistance rates, milder metabolic disturbances. The focus for these folks tends to be on androgen excess management. They may have lower risk of endometrial cancer, and unfortunately, they are often overlooked because they are still experiencing a regular menstrual cycle. And phenotype D is the normoandrogenic PCOS. You have normal androgens. You don't have those high levels of male hormones, but you are experiencing ovulatory dysfunction and polycystic ovaries can be observed. This tends to be the mildest form of PCOS, and I do not mean that it is not causing significant issues in your life, but as compared to some of the other forms, some of the health risks are just a little bit lower if this is the phenotype of PCOS there's the lowest metabolic risk, there's no signs of excess male hormones, there is a better response to fertility treatment typically. Now here's where we get to the self-assessment checklist. Again, I have a form that you can download from the link in my description box. There is a little bit more information that might be useful to your doctor if you take it in. Otherwise, you can just follow along as I ask you a few questions about your symptoms to try and figure out your phenotype. Have you ever experienced irregular periods, meaning cycles longer than 35 days or fewer than 9 periods in a year? missed periods for 3+ months, not due to pregnancy or menopause, and or have you ever had difficulty tracking ovulation or getting pregnant? If you said yes to any of those questions, you have signs of ovulatory dysfunction. Okay, next group. Do you have any of the following? Excess facial or body hair, persistent acne past adolescence, thinning hair or male pattern baldness, blood tests that show high testosterone or DHEA. If you said yes to one of those, you are showing signs for hyperandrogenism. Now, last group. Have you been told you have polycystic ovaries based on a pelvic ultrasound? This refers to appearance, not actual cysts or pain. And or have you been told you have an elevated anti-Mullerian hormone higher than 3.9 nanograms per ml? If you marked yes for either one of those two questions, you are showing signs for polycystic ovarian morphology. Now, let's analyze your result. If you said yes to all three categories, you may have PCOS phenotype A. If you said yes to the first two sections, but not the third, you may have phenotype B. But if you haven't had an ovarian ultrasound or an MHA reading, you may want to get that done to distinguish between phenotype A and B. If you said yes to sections 2 and 3, you may have phenotype C. If you said yes to sections 1 and 3, you may have phenotype D. Now, as both medical professionals and patients, we want to make sure that we are personalizing your treatment plan so we can actually address your symptoms and your goals. For example, if you don't need to be on medication for insulin resistance, then putting you on an insulin resistance medication could cause dangerously low blood sugar or lead to nutrient deficiencies. If you don't want to get pregnant, then your treatment plan probably is going to look different than if you do want to get pregnant. And phenotyping is really useful. 49.1% of people diagnosed with PCOS actually have PCOS phenotype D, but are being treated as if they have PCOS phenotype A. And phenotype D only has a 38% risk of insulin resistance, as opposed to phenotype A, which has a 91% risk of insulin resistance. So the treatment plans there probably look a little bit different. It's important to understand all this shit when we are talking about diet, lifestyle, and medications that you may manage until you hit menopause or even maybe for the rest of your life. A little bit more here on the treatment for each phenotype. Phenotype A requires aggressive metabolic management, which might mean something like metformin or even a GLP-1 medication. Phenotype B focuses on hormonal balance and ovulation, which means, again, you might be the best candidate for that clomiphene medication, which tends to be the first line medication for PCOS, but isn't necessarily appropriate for everyone. If you have phenotype B, it might also be best managed with hormonal birth control, hormonal replacement therapy, or anti-androgen medication. Phenotype C prioritizes androgen reductions, which might mean insulin resistance drugs like metformin or GLP-1s again, like phenotype A. It might mean hormonal birth control, anti-androgen meds, or it might even mean surgery if you are hoping to get pregnant. Phenotype D requires milder ovulation support and probably wouldn't require or meet the criteria for metformin or GLP-1 weight loss medications. This is probably the group that is most often referred to as lean PCOS. However, these folks might benefit the most from hormonal birth control or ovulation induction if your goal is to get pregnant. Now, I do want to leave you with the fact that I am not a doctor. I am a registered dietitian, and so I am legally not allowed to diagnose PCOS or a phenotype, and I'm not qualified to recommend specific medications. I am only here to educate on the different options that exist and translate medical jargon to the everyday person. But I hope that this gives you some options to explore with your medical care team, and I hope it gives you some hope that just because one treatment plan didn't work doesn't mean that nothing will or can work for you and the symptoms that you are experiencing. So I would love to know if this helped you determine your potential PCOS phenotype and if you think that you have been treating the right phenotype. Now, despite not being qualified to diagnose PCOS, as a registered dietitian, I am qualified to provide nutrition and lifestyle recommendations for the treatment of PCOS. For some people, nutrition and lifestyle management is going to be enough to deal with the symptoms they are experiencing. However, for some people, they are going to need nutrition and lifestyle to accompany their medication treatment. So if you are interested in what are the specific nutrition, diet, supplement, even herb recommendations for each type of phenotype, subscribe to this channel because that is the next video that will be coming out. And if you at this point have questions about GLP-1 medications and PCOS, I have another video that I'll link right here that goes over some of the research that we have about GLP-1 medications like Ozempic. And thank you so much for being here.